Hazard. Ah, the devil are in your dice tonight. One last throw for all of it. What say you? Speaking of the devil and wagers, know you why the smiths strike their anvil between blows? Do you not? Then let me tell you this tale before we see what our final wager reveals. It happened that in Cardiff town there lived a smith of great skill, Gwilm by name. Blades forged by Gwilm's hand would not soon blunt and swung true. An axe from Gwilm's anvil could cut thrice the usual number of trees in a day ere the woodman would tire. And shears made by Gwilm's hand were so keen that a sheep shorn with them would appear as though it had simply stepped out of its clothes for bathing. But none of these was anything next to Gwilm's shoeing of a horse. A horse shod by Gwilm could run 4 times the leagues of any other horse at thrice the speed without tiring. It would stand true and go well. And never would it lose a shoe. Yes, thrice 6 fortnights would a horse hold its shoes, and when they were reset by Gwilm, they looked as if those new made. Great was the skill of Gwilm, but he was great with God and humble man. And those there were in town who were jealous of Gwilm's skills spoke that he was in league with dark powers. But it was not so. He was pious, though he did speak with some pride of the skills of his son and the beauty of his wife. But evil spoken can evil beget. And so it was one night that Gwilm had a visitor in his forge. It was late one night, some days before Whitsun, when Gwilm was working on an order for the manor in Trowbridge. And suddenly, across the anvil, a figure stood. Gwilm stopped and made his obeisance and bade the figure welcome to his forge, but he was afraid. Near 7 feet the figure stood, his head bowed to fit between the rafters of Gwilm's shop. He spoke in a voice like oil on chilled waters. "It is said that you are the finest ferrior ever to swing hammer, smith." And Gwilm bowed his head and said, "What gifts God bestows, the pious man does not hide." And the figure snarled within the hood of its cloak, and it reached out a hand, taloned with evil, wicked claws, and lifted forth the hem of its robe to reveal not feet, but hooves, cloven and wicked. "Then I would be shod by your gift, smith, to speed me on my way through this world of men," said the devil. But Gwilm shook his head. "Nay, my gifts are for the good of all, and not for such as you, old man Splitfoot." But the devil laughed, and cunning eyes sought Gwilm from the depths of his hood. "Yes, yet you have spoken with pride of your sons, yea, and the beauty of your wife besides, smith. Perhaps I shall take them with me this night, and leave you with your gift of heaven." And the devil spat, and on the floor where that landed was a dark mark for all the following days. Gwilm bowed his head, for he saw no way out of this conundrum. He would not see any ill done by his hand, but he would not see gone into damnation his wife and children. And he drew steel and began to stretch it out and to form it as for oxen shoes. And the devil laughed. Now Gwilm, as he worked at his anvil, hung his head, and he prayed to God in his heart to help him. And as he went forth and began to measure and to pare the devil's feet, his skin crawling from the evil flesh that he touched, he prayed the Pater Noster in his heart. And so Gwilm worked at the forge, and so between strikes of the anvil, of the steel, he struck the anvil with his hammer to mark the prayers that he spoke of the rosary. So the shoes took shape, and so he measured the foot of the devil, and the devil capered around on new trimmed hooves, and so soon he was quenching and fitting and setting hot shoe to foot, and the smell of brimstone and carrion filled the smithy. And the devil laughed. Soon Gwilm was tapping the final nail, clinching the final set, taking the final swipe with rasp and the wipe with oiled cloth, and stood back. His head hung low to see the devil shod fine and true by his own hand. And again the devil laughed, a noise like rusted iron falling from a great height, and he began to dance and caper around the smithy. And Gwilm was afraid. But as he hung his head, the devil's laughter stopped. He began to caper faster. He began to trot. And what had been a laughter turned to a snarl, and the trot became a canter. For once he had stopped moving, he could not slow, nor stop, no, only go faster. Around and around the forge the devil ran, careening off of the walls, and with a scream and a galloping leap he leapt through the door. And that scream took the temper from 6 good blades hanging near to hand. And the devil ran off into the night. Now Gwilm, he knelt, and he made the sign of the cross, and prayed to God, and felt forgiveness in his heart, and knew that no harm would be done by his skill that day, and he went home swift to his wife and sons, and held them to his bosom. And he was a pious man ever from that day still, and his forge worked true. And ever after that day he would tap the heel of his anvil between blows, in memory of the Pater Noster that he had spoken that night, to help him save from the devil doing harm to all. And as for the devil, it was 4 times 8 score fortnights that he was not seen again. For the devil could not stop, could not slow, until every scrap of shoe had been worn away, yes, and every nail had fallen from his hoof. And the deeds of men were purer during that time. And he never can hear the sound of a smith's anvil ere the devil goes lame for 3 full days. So you will never see him around the smithy of a working man.